slowly to peer out the front windows, searching for signs of Sebastian. "Maybe you should start looking around. You need anything? I'll be over there." April pointed and walked toward the open kitchen at the other end of the room. Claire felt put off by her curt manner, bordering on rudeness. Of course the situation was awkward, but if the house had to be sold, she should be glad to have a buyer. When Carl told Claire about the house, she'd jumped on it. She could live closer to him and her aunt, and get Sebastian away from the city with all its reminders of his failures and misfortunes. The proliferation of galleries only blocks from their apartment was an especially cruel taunt. "We could have a real garden," she said in her pitch to convince him, "and build you a huge studio." She always equated the country with the last joyful moments of her childhood, before divorce and shuttling between Tampa and Bridgeport, before her father's new family and her mother's depression and early, swift demise from ovarian cancer. She remembered April as a pretty tow-headed child with a wild streak she found heroic. She was curious to see her again, had even thought they might reconnect. But the woman standing beyond the kitchen counter was bitter, unfriendly, markedly changed. Her face was worn, though her body in a tank top and cutoffs was still slim-hipped and youthful. How did she keep her figure like that after 3 kids? Claire wondered. Meanwhile, she couldn't shake off the 10 or so pounds she'd gained in as many years. Her body no longer fit her small head and short hair, which began to gray in her late 20s, with a pronounced streak near the temple. That streak, with her side-parted marcelled bob, had a deliberately retro effect that, in her youth, was dramatic. At 43, she worried it actually aged her. She pulled out her phone to call Sebastian. It had only one signal bar, so she sent a text. "Where are you?" Thinks she wants us in and out. Sometimes she wondered why he even owned a phone. She felt the old resentment chafing and pushed it down while she inspected the rest of the house. In the entrance hall, under the narrow stairwell leading to the second floor, she entered a tiny half-bathroom with a tankless toilet and pedestal sink. Both worked, though were none too clean. The floral wallpaper on one wall was stained and buckling. On the dark linoleum floor were nail clippings and swirled clumps of blonde hair. She heard April cleaned houses in the area and wondered how she could live like this in her own home. Shuddering, she turned to leave, but caught a strong whiff of something metallic, like rusted iron. She turned back and examined the faucets and toilet for leakage. There was nothing obvious. "Weird," she said out loud, hoping they wouldn't need a plumber. She was just starting to realize what an undertaking it was to buy an old house. She left the bathroom and walked further down the hall. At the rear of the house was a large bedroom that could be converted into Sebastian's studio. Clothes and shoes were strewn on the floor, and random boxes piled into corners. Claire had been warned, but was still unprepared for how decrepit everything was. The wood floors creaked, and the walls and ceilings were dusty, with the plaster cracked in several places. Still, even with the liens on the house, they'd be getting it for less than $30,000. They'd bought a sturdy used station wagon for only $2,000. Carl figured it would take another $80K or so to get the house fixed right. The mortgage crisis the year before torpedoed the housing market, but if they could get $650K for their apartment, even after paying him back, they'd still be ahead almost $300,000. Carl suggested a reasonably priced contractor who could, he said, deal with most personalities, tacit acknowledgement of her husband's mercurial moods. Sebastian would oversee the renovation, living in the house full-time, while she stayed in the city during the week, going to the Midtown office where she worked as a civil attorney. She hoped it would be a temporary arrangement until she could find something closer to Caliban. Jobs were scarce, but she'd had 2 promising interviews with a firm in Albany. She'd likely take a salary cut, but the lower cost of living should compensate, and the firm mostly handled property law, which would be less stressful than the personal injury.